Welcome back. Okay, so now we've got everybody ready. They know why this matters to them. And after a nice break and some good food, we're ready to hear how you can make these tools right for you. So the very first tool is be human. And I used to just call this one self-care, and then I realized, well, actually, there's so many things we want to do, we start putting demands on ourselves as if we're not human, and then when we're not able to get 18 hours of work done, we still beat ourselves up. We forget that we are just human, and we need to just be the human we are, with however much sleep that is, or what we need to eat, or whatever it is we need to do. So it's being human. And part of being human means we need to let go of the animal's journey. So that's a little, that's God there, in case you're wondering, looking through a crystal ball like he does. So we don't know all things. Our paths intersect in some way with these animals. It might be a whole lifetime, it might be 10 minutes, whatever that might be. And all we can do is do our part, do what we can at the time, given all the conditions at the time and the greater flow of compassion at the time, and then we need to let go. So of course I'll give you another example of me doing something wrong, and that goes back to blessed bonds. But just very briefly, the German Shepherd lady, her owner ended up being terminally ill, so we had been fostering her, but then we needed to find her a home. And lady had lived with her owner all her life. The owner had been disabled, and lady was 6 years old. The owner had been disabled for 8 years, so lady was used to just living with one woman in the house all the time. She was always there. So my first naive thought, controlling thought, was I have to find lady a home with somebody that's always there. So anybody that worked for a living were immediately axed off as a possibility, which is ridiculous, right? Of course. But so anyway, long story short, what ended up happening is the foster found a nice couple. They both worked for a living, and they had a dog, Sergeant, and I didn't even think of having Lady be with another dog. I thought she needed just one person to herself. And I don't know if you guys have had this happen. I had never had it happen before, but when those two dogs met, they like fell madly in love with each other. Oh, it was just amazing. But it wasn't at all what my controlling mind thought that lady needed. And then the couple sends me pictures of them at Lake Michigan. They took them on a cruise in Chicago where you can go with people, and that nice young couple got to go too. They get to go with dogs. So it's wonderful. But an example of letting go of a lot of your own stuff, so the animals can go on their journey.
Your own assumptions.
Yes, yes. And then to think, what replenishes you? And there's so many ideas for self-care and self-compassion. And like we said, first you've got to believe in it. And then you have to listen deep inside to you. And if you're having trouble remembering what you like to do, try to think about even back when you were a child, or when you didn't put these kinds of restrictions on you having self-care and self-compassion. What did you like to do? And consider some of that. And of course, meditation, I've heard about, people have talked to me about, and I do a little myself. That's a good one, but it may not be your thing. Gardening or sitting in a garden, adult coloring. A lot of people like that. Reading a book.
And Linda, I don't see the television on this.
I didn't put that on.
No, sometimes in the past we've put a television on this slide because Linda knows that I quite like. That for me is escapism, so yeah.
And it's not for me.
And the movies, yeah.
But not for me, and I'm in charge of the slides. But no, of course it's a totally valid self-care. It's knowing yourself. So what I put on for me, of course, is when all else fails, turn up the music and dance with your dog, because this is what I discovered I love to do, and that's Jack, my dancing partner right there. And he truly is an amazing dancing partner. So what I do is in the morning, I'll just put on music, whatever it seems like I might be in the mood for, and I'll just dance or shake or whatever, move in my living room. And Then when I do some slow down to cool down, that's when Jack comes in because he's a slow dancer, loves to slow dance. And no kidding, he's a romantic slow dancer. So as soon as he hears the slow music now, because he associates that with dancing, he hops right up onto my chest, and he does the swooping. He really does. He gives me little kisses. It's amazing. I have a few other dogs, of course, kind of wild little terriers, and so they think we're chasing them, so they're running around, and they're having a good time too, but Jack and I are dancing. So I love that, so I had to put that one on. But you want to think what works for you. Because if you just think things like, yes, I better exercise more, let me go do this, and you may be picking something that isn't what you like to do, like I used to do. I tried all kinds of exercise that I didn't like, and here, this was waiting for me all along. And self-care for each other when you're in charge of your teams, like sounds like most of you are. Right?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's some opportunities here when we are doing things for each other. Even though we have a candy coming up. Linda and I were talking about this. We're often at meetings. I know this happens at Best Friends. They're having a meeting, and out comes all the candy jars. And I go, in the back of my head, I'm not in charge, so I can't say don't do that. But in the back of my head, I'm going, is that really the best thing? A lot of sugar at this time during this meeting. So I think to be mindful of what is nourishing and good for your teams, rather than just going for the big bag at Costco, that you can buy cheaply and then just open out on the table. So I think there's some options there. And even for our personal dietary needs, I've heard a lot of people say they've been benefited from giving up sugar or cutting back on sugar. Anyone here had that experience? Oh yeah, good, a few hands going up. Yeah, I mean, those are things you can work out for yourself. I did this presentation, or a version of this presentation at the sanctuary, and I threw it out, what do other people do? And this one lady, it was very sweet, she said, I tried gluten-free, but it really wasn't doing it for me. I just love bread so much. And when I put bread back in my diet, I just felt great. So it was kind of like the opposite of what the trends are. But that's where it goes, that's where it's individual.
Yeah, so
you work out what's good for you. There are plenty of options. But be aware of what you're putting inside. I think that really is part of it. We looked at some of those other exhaustion and that list of signs. Sometimes that can be linked back to what you're putting in your mouth as well. Yeah.
And you have on that same worksheet a place where you can think about what might be some things that would be self-care for you and your team. So just have that and try to do that sometime and see what comes to mind. Or maybe even do it with the team. Like, what could we do? What are some things we could put in every day that would be good self-care for us that we would like to do? And quick refreshers are always good, because we always get asked, but what's something we can do in less than 5 minutes, because our days are too busy. We can't put in a whole 20-minute massage or something big like that. So there are quick refreshers. Pop a peppermint. I'll just go right to that one. It's because she's passing that out. And one of the reasons we put that on is, again, that neuroscience research shows that actually, for whatever reason, sucking on a peppermint for 30 seconds can help move the body into that sympathetic reactive mode to response. So if you're all about to try to creatively problem solve, or you feel that trigger inside, try popping a peppermint before responding and see if that can't just help your body get in that calmer state. So it's just a little trick that they've shown, that research shows. And I don't know why, and people say, does spearmint work or cinnamon?
Yes,
I don't know.
I was going to say, maybe there's other alternatives like peppermint.
I don't know what it is, if it's the stepping back, but peppermint does have some powers to it. And Stop and Play, that's one of my dogs that insists that I throw that donut for him every morning before doing anything else, but it's nice to play for a minute. Sit with an animal. There's usually plenty of animals around for you guys to just sit with for a minute, 2 minutes. Just sit. Some people have said, yeah, and remember the joy of why you're doing what you're doing. And play a song or watch a video. Research has again shown that watching one of those little videos like on YouTube that speaks to you, that you find funny or enjoyable, that does reduce stress and put somebody in a parasympathetic mode. So that could be the TV for faith, whatever. So that is a little quick, helpful thing you can also do. Another one, step out and sit under a tree. Might sound kind of weird, but trees are also kind of magical and powerful. And just to do that, I gave a workshop at a vet clinic, and they have a big, gorgeous tree right outside their back door. And they have texted me and told me that at very critical times, they have walked out for a minute and sat under the tree or just leaned against the tree, and it's made a big difference. So there are little things that you can do. Stay connected to what grounds you. And we heard this in some of what you guys were sharing about your family, your grandkids, your own dogs and cats. Again, you know what grounds you, what keeps you grounded. Is it reading certain books and being with your family? Is it possibly going on different kinds of retreats? Listening to certain music? What is it for you? Is it making sure you sit down and have time with that cup of coffee in the morning that grounds you? So again, these are just things I'm throwing out, but can you look inside and let yourself do the things that keep you grounded every day? Because there's plenty of stuff in the work we do that can unground us. Yeah. And then, of course, encourage each other to do the same.
And we had this in the previous reflections we were talking about. This is something, we're setting a tone. Many people address that. The last time we were sharing is that we set the tone in our organizations. That's very important.
So maybe even deciding to have some events with each other and their families, having picnics or potluck, and remembering that a person has a birthday too, things like that, just the little
Does
things.
anyone do that with their, do events with families as well? No?
A little bit.
Think about that, because, other people's families, their children or what, they're like important to them. I remember mine were when they were little. They're now all big grown-up people.
Sure.
But yes, including people's families and their loved ones, very important.
And we had a couple people talk about this again in sharing too, how important it is to model self-care.
Yep.
Being out of the office, turning off the phone or a little less of the phone stuff.
What about that story from Bali? I always remember that one. That was the lunchtime reference.
Yes, that when I was in Bali, there was a veterinarian that was taking over a rescue group there, and she said to me that the board president had pulled her aside and said, whatever you do, though, don't eat lunch during the day, because once people see you're eating lunch, they're going to start eating lunch, and it's a disaster, right? So I told her, I said, no, make sure you eat lunch and everybody eats lunch. So I don't know what happened, because it's out in Bali, so who knows what happened. And of course, the cell phone's a big one too, just a little bit less. And if you're texting in the middle of the night, then other people think they should be that superhuman thing, where we think we're superhuman.
One of our supervisor head people realized that she was sending out emails at 12 at night. And you know how easy it is? You get the email and you look up there and you see, when was that sent? I do it. Usually I'm going, are they mad? But if you're under that person, if you're in their chain of command hierarchy, you might start feeling guilty, because your boss is out doing all this wonderful thing at midnight and you're hopefully tucked up in bed. So this supervisor said she put a stop to sending out emails late at night for that very reason. Yeah.
Set limits. This is a big one.
This is places that don't set limits, and huge negative consequences for everyone. It's hard, and you in the front here, you were talking about this very thing. You have to create the boundaries, even though it's tough and challenging to do that. It really, capacity for care, I think we had that on Joe's slide earlier too, And I hadn't heard that word until a few conferences ago, and I thought, wow, that really does, I like those words, because it says you can only care for what you have the capacity for. And once you start stretching that capacity, you lose the care. And it makes sense. And let's face it, I think we've either done it ourselves or seen people who've done it, and it's not a good consequence for you or the animals.
Or the other people in the
team. The other
team,
people,
too.
everyone suffers, yeah.
And of course, besides setting limits for the organization, this is also setting your own personal limits, which again, some of you were sharing about that when we were doing that exercise, because you know what they are. You know when you're not being yourself, and you're not giving what you need, and you're getting crabbier to other people, and it's affecting other people too. So you know it, whether it's fostering even, or how many animals you have, or how many hours you volunteer, because we all know it's unlimited what the needs are. So we cannot wait to set our limits until all the work is done. That's not
and one
gonna
thing
happen.
we've been able to do at Best Friends, because it is a very large organization, is allow people to change jobs even. You know, it's another way of setting limits, because, and there might be, depending on size of organization, variations of that. And I think some people do this. If you have a front desk, and that's a very stressful position, you know, animals coming in, that person, that position can get rotated. Does that happen? Anyone do that? Yeah, okay. So that often find little tweaks that you can do to help people with boundaries here, and maybe create a backroom job if someone's having stress dealing with the public, or a sit-down job if they're getting exhausted dealing with the animals. You know, there are ways in which we can move the jobs around.
And sometimes just as an individual then, we have to do that. We have to realize in that empathic distress part of the flow of compassion, you may be doing some way of helping animals that's just constantly triggering you in that state of fight or flight, and all the self-care in the world isn't going to help. It's just not the right fit for you.
Yeah.
And there's lots and lots of ways to help animals. So it doesn't mean you're letting animals down if you decide, I need to do the courageous thing and find a different way to help animals. This is not the best way for my human being to be in the flow of compassion. And that can be a tough decision to make. I mean, actually, it's what I made in terms of Blessed Bonds. I couldn't do it. I couldn't limit myself while I was running that organization, and so that wasn't my best fit. Now, clearly doing what I'm doing now, helping people help animals, I'm energized, I'm passionate, this is the right fit for me, but it can be a really hard talk with yourself to realize you need to do that.
To step back,
And so then appreciate each other. So maybe somebody's not doing it the way you think they should, or not doing it what you want, but where is the gift that they have to offer that you can acknowledge and appreciate?
And I like what was said here in the front row about being kind. Being kind, you said that. Being kind to each other. Even if we're being stressed, just to acknowledge that we're all doing the same work. And we deserve kindness.
And it's hard because we're not being kind to ourselves, and now we're not to each other. Okay, so that's our first tool, which is self-care, be human. What's your reason for it? However, we all know all the self-care in the world, all the pizza parties and coffee or whatever, does not help the way our brains are often tortured by what we see and what we can't do and what we want to do, and when we do something and it doesn't turn out the way we wanted it to for the animal, it's just not going to help to just sit down and have a bunch of cookies and coffee. What can we do? What can we do to look at what we're doing from a different perspective. And so that's what this tool is. It's a tool for just that purpose that you can use individually and then hopefully even within your teams. And I call it Honor Feelings Reframe Story. But I didn't invent this. This comes from lots of places: ancient wisdom, spiritual wisdom, psychology principles, a little bit of quantum physics I'm realizing is even thrown in there, common sense, but we just call it Honor Feelings Reframe Story for you learning the tool today. So let's go into what that means. So it's taking a new look at things, which is why we have our dog with our big glasses. Honor feelings. This is such an important part of this tool because we must honor and acknowledge and accept whatever our feelings are. Feelings are always normal, no matter how bizarre you think your feeling is, or maybe even wrong, it's not. Feelings are normal. They come from what matters to you and what your values are. So any feeling, you're feeling like you'd like to choke or strangle the person coming in, giving up their 15-year-old cat. Okay, that feeling is okay. It's normal. But, I'll say this in front of the camera, doing that to somebody is not okay and not normal. But it's important to let yourself know that feeling comes from your empathy for that cat and just frustration that this is happening. So that's the big thing there. The other thing neuroscience shows, too, is when feelings come through us and they're not attached to other negative thoughts that send us deeper down the hole, they really are satisfied with being acknowledged for about 90 seconds and passing through. Now, it doesn't mean they won't pass back. They will, if you're dealing with sadness or grief. But the feelings themselves don't want to just stay deep in your body and make you miserable. It's just not the way that they work. So there's a lot of ways of honoring feelings as an organization besides yourself.
Yes,
right,
at Best Friends, we created, placements is what we call burial of one of the sanctuary animals or an animal from the public. We call it placements and tucking in. The blessing. Has anyone here attended a blessing? Yes, a few people here. We came, in fact, Linda was very helpful in this. We were having a grief overload, cumulative grief experience at Best Friends. This is several years ago. And I knew of Linda's work at the pet loss groups and invited Linda out to talk to the staff. And we did psychology things. And then we realized that we had another opportunity because we live in such a beautiful place. And also to honor one of our staff who, while having her day job as a cat adoption specialist, took a 4-year chaplain program. Online, but she also traveled to places to take her course. So it was a 4-year degree in being a chaplain. And we thought that it would be great to honor that, her commitment to do that. And out of that came the blessing, which is a non-denominational gathering. We do it every month at the end of the month, the last Thursday of the month, all throughout the year, in all weathers, unless the road is snow-packed and we can't make it out there. And we read the names of the animals that have passed at the sanctuary that month, and the people who are there. And it's open to visitors, volunteers, our interns, staff, whoever, get an opportunity to freely express the story and the feelings, and they're usually very positive stories. It's not insisted it be that. People can honor their feelings,
Right.
But oftentimes people will tell the good things about having shared their life with that pet.
And that's Angel's Rest, by the way, where they do that. Has anybody been to Best Friends and Angel's Rest?
Yes, you've seen
this,
this,
so you
yes.
know what that is.
Yeah, so that is a great way, and there are versions of that. That's, of course, a sitting down at a place, but there are versions of that you can do with your own teams and your own staff. Maybe it is a bulletin board where you list the names of the animals that have passed, or tell good stories,
Right, sure.
have pictures, successful adoptions, you know, a place in your facility, if you have one, that you can acknowledge transitions in life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so after honoring and acknowledging and accepting the feelings, then we can reframe the story. Because like we were talking about, we can't all just stay in cumulative grief. We don't want to be sad all the time. This is our life. Mm-hmm. So how can we reframe the story? So what's important to learning how to reframe a story is to understand where our thoughts come from. Now, our thoughts always make up our stories. What our brain does is it produces automatic thoughts all the time. I mean, you guys are aware of that, right? Thoughts just come popping in. You may be thinking about all of a sudden somebody from 4th grade could pop in. Anything, right? That's what automatic thoughts do. Thousands of them all the time. It's like the pancreas produces enzymes, the brain produces thoughts. So this is something that we do. Also, neuroscience shows 75 to 90% of those automatic thoughts that go on tend to be either negative or problem solving or thinking about something bad from the past or something bad that could happen in the future. So who would think these automatic thoughts that come in are negative? So if you find yourself with those, it's normal. Here's what some of them can look like pertaining to animals, of course.
Did I do enough? If only I would have. If only they would have. I should have. They should have. Why didn't I? Is
Feel
that
familiar?
true? Is that true, guys? Yeah. Automatic thoughts.
So what can we do? We can't go in and fight those automatic thoughts. That's like, don't think of a pink elephant. Ding, pink elephant, right? So it's not like you can say, get out of there, because they're floating around. But we can step back from them, get ourselves in that calmer state, and realize these are just those automatic thoughts. I don't have to identify with them. I don't have to chase them and believe them and go further with them. I can just step back and observe them. Then we can choose to put some other thoughts in. We can choose different conditions that just help the automatic thoughts go on their way. We can choose our focus. So we can choose to not go down the tornadoing, is one of the psychology words for where one bad thought leads to the next, to the next, to the next, and you find yourself in a tornado of imagining the worst possible thing happening. What ifs and if only, and we can do the best we can at the time with love. We can say that instead. So something happens, we do have the ability to choose our focus and put that thought in.
I was just remembering somebody that had attended, Linda and I used to offer the Giving Heart Retreat at the sanctuary over the years, and we had one of the people that took part in that had gotten locked in one of those what-if cycles, and we were worried about her, honestly. Again, I used that term before about being locked in, because this is often what happens with these thought patterns. We just can't break out of them. Anyone had that experience? Yeah, okay. It's just like repetitive. And this young lady was in that state of mind, and we were concerned about her.
She was stuck in it for years.
Yes.
Like, why didn't she do something different?
Yeah. And it was very fortunate, even though you did not, as the psychologist, address that specifically. It was something you said.
It's in the next slide.
Here, okay, yeah.
It was the assumption about what the other path would have been.
That's exactly it.
And that seemed to free her. So it's the idea that we always, and I see this in the pet loss group all the time, like somebody's dog who passed away because he didn't do well with the chemotherapy. Then the owner is saying, why did I do chemotherapy? I shouldn't have done it. And then we'll say, but we don't know what the path would have looked like. There's always that assumption that the other path, everything would have worked out wonderfully. Or a bad adoption, but this adoption, this home would have been wonderful. We never know what that other path looks like.
And I have to say, just to follow on that story, There was the day one was like, oh my goodness, we're very concerned about this young lady. Obviously, she absorbed this information that just came out during the course of the workshop. She came in the next day, and we both looked at each other and went, what happened? It was like everything had lifted. But the follow-up of that, she then later came to the How to Start and Run an Animal Sanctuary workshop because she had started an animal rescue. So it was one of those ones where we saw the full cycle of being able to break out of this negative pattern and then find the joy and find the path for her. Yeah, that was a good one.
So on the back of if you still have the sheet that has the self-compassion and care on the back, you'll find choose the focus of your story, compassion blocking thoughts versus compassion flowing thoughts. So we'll need the mic for this. Maybe just go ahead and give it to this man right here. Faith is going to read the compassion blocking thought, and then each of you you'll give it to the next person. You guys get to read the compassion flowing thought because we'll plant good thoughts into your neural pathways so you don't have to hear the bad ones. So then you'll respond to what Faith says. So Faith, start us off.
So much sadness. Who could be happy?
I can let joy come in along with sadness.
These tragic events are unbearable to me.
We all face a challenging aspect of living animals.
I must keep replaying the self-torturing details.
I can choose my focus and how I tell this story.
I need others to understand me to deal with this.
Self-compassion will strengthen my ability to cope.
I must address all of my thoughts that come at me.
I will honor my feelings and question all thoughts.
I'm helpless to the replay of sad images.
I can choose the images I want to focus on.
The world is cruel.
I can bring more compassion to a flawed world.
I must fully let go of this animal forever.
I can choose to connect in a new way.
I'm so disappointed in people.
Humans are complex, but we are all in this together.
Staying upset is a way to honor this animal.
Staying open to life and continuing to love is a tribute.
I want to avoid as much emotional pain as I can.
All experiences are part of the journey.
I won't be able to get through the day.
I will embrace each day, one moment at a time.
My job is to alleviate all animal suffering.
My role is to share my unique gifts of compassion.
Okay, so do you get the feel for that? And I've got a couple lines so you can try your own sometime if you need to. So the automatic thought can still come in, but you can choose to focus different. And actually, when we repeat something over these thoughts that make up our stories over and over again, they actually cause neural pathways to form. So we can choose to reframe the story, and this is one way. You can find your own way, but you can look for the gratitude, look for the gifts, and then there's always growth in everything we do. So what's the growth? Just real briefly, this was Chili Dog. He was my little therapy assistant that I got to have for 5 years. And so when he passed away, I immediately honored my feelings, but then went for a new story so that every time I would think of Chili Dog, I would think how lucky I was to get to have him those 5 years of his senior life and to have the most amazing little therapy intuitive assistant ever. And one of the gifts of his passing, even though I would have, of course, wanted Chili Dog to live forever, like we all do with our animal companions we love so much, but he passed away at 15, and a gift that was waiting for me is Jack was one of my little terriers in the house that you know is now my dancing partner. He saw that there was a hole. There was a space in the bed. There were arms that she used to carry Chili Dog around on, and so he and I have enhanced our bond. And then growth is I got much more into this whole idea of reframing and compassion and sharing that with all of you. So what we can do And what I do, this is the template I have for myself, and when I deal with a loss, I will immediately make one of these and write in, I might put the picture of the dog or cat, or it could even be a person. I actually did this when I lost my mom a couple years ago, and I didn't want to just remember that last week in the hospital with her. That was painful. So I immediately filled this out for myself, stuck it by my computer, because when you're in grief, it's natural for the mind to want that person or animal to still be in your life, so that is what's on your mind. And if you don't tell a new story, your brain's going to go back to the last few days, the last day, the hard stuff. It's just a natural thing that we do. But we can do this instead. And then now when I think of chili dog or I think of my mom, my neural pathways immediately go to these positive things that I had right by my computer instead of the other memories. So that's how it works. Does that make sense? And the last tool is stay connected to each other. Stay connected. We're all in this together, and we're all like-minded, and one of the interesting things that I see all the time, and I know you do too, is we tend to fight with each other, even though we're the like-minded people, where we could get tons of support from each other. And I believe part of that reason is because sometimes we feel so discouraged with the public, but we think, well, at least somebody else who loves animals will agree with me on this. And then when we don't, we're shocked and disillusioned. But we're all in this together, and even in this world, we're all in this together, if we go that far. So let go of the journey of others, remembering we can't change other people. We can't change them. We may have an influence. We may be able to plant a seed. We can give our best compassionate response to a situation, which might even be, I'm sorry I can't help you. Here's some things I can refer you to. Because when you're giving your best compassionate response, remember now it means compassion to you and each other too. It's not just the person with the animal. And remembering that the self-growth of others is not your job. We so often justify telling somebody what they should do because we're they need to learn that. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But the more you can just be your best compassionate response and not think that you have to be in charge of them changing. This is very helpful in relationships, spouses, partnerships. It's very refreshing for the other person if you give up trying to adjust their self-growth, but it is very tempting to do. But again, the neuroscience research shows telling people what to do, doing it in a negative way, showing people what they did wrong in a negative way demoralizes people. And they lose confidence. It's not helpful. Again, it's this positive approach that gives us the self-growth. And then sit down and listen, and then talk. If you're having an issue with somebody on your team, listen first. That's probably the biggest thing we can do. And as we learn to listen to ourselves again, it'll be easier to listen to somebody else too. And then however you need to respond, but at least really listening to what else is going on. Get people out in nature. This is a big one when Faith and I had asked people what they do for their team. This was a huge one, that people like to go outside and do things outside. Forest bathing?
Yes, forest bathing. Have you heard about this? It's kind of a big thing. Just walking through trees bestows some kind of magical
it does.
release. I know.
It's even scientifically proven.
I know, they've studied
Your
it.
immune system gives off something that actually helps. Trees have it. That's why they live so long, and they'll give off that same secretion that actually can help build your immune system, as well as we know your heart rate can go down, blood pressure. It's just very good for us.
And sometimes in the desert, you have to go look for the trees. I know, I could see people going like, well, trees, okay.
One tree will do it,
But something in nature. And
Yes,
there are,
something in
people
nature.
do, even I suppose sitting next to a potted plant
That could do
will
it.
be
yeah.
good. We can all do that, yes.
We'll have to check some research on it. That
Yeah,
might be
yeah,
interesting to do. And explore tools together. So maybe together, if as a team you're really facing a challenge, is there some way to together honor feelings, but then reframe the story and find a way just to help each other? Have meetings once a month where something like this is brought up or to refresh. Or I've got dogs and cats there where we have so many books on how to help dogs and cats, but here's dogs and cats looking for books on how to help humans. So that's what that represents.
Cute.
And have fun together too. Potlucks. I have karaoke up there. But ask your team if that's something they want to do, because
Exactly.
some people hate that. So any fun together needs to either be fun that people have decided on together, not that's imposed.
Not an imposed fun,
No,
yeah.
because that's not fun. That picture.
Or make it optional.
Yes, optional fun. There was a cat organization that actually they have a fun committee, and that's what those volunteers do, come up with fun things based on suggestions. So when I saw those little cartoon characters, I thought they looked like a fun committee. And choose our focus together. This is, again, something you can do in less than 5 minutes at your place or maybe on Facebook. There's a group that does things that made us smile today where people can put that in on Fridays. Another place where I gave a workshop, they put up that bulletin board with just positive things that people felt like putting up, inspirations, quotes, things that they were thankful for. And then they sent me the picture, texted to me, and they said, this worked. Our really negative person we were telling you about in the workshop that didn't come to the workshop, she actually added a positive thing. So you just never know what'll work for people. And your team's energy does make a difference.
And energy is one of those things that's catching. You know, if you're around positivity, energy, enthusiasm, joy, it communicates to everybody. And again, back to the leaders in the room, this is something, the tone you need to be setting for the people that you're working beneath you, below you, in your hierarchy, however you call it, your partners in the work. You've got a responsibility as a leader to listen to all of what we're saying here and utilize it.
And it works. The example I give here are these two cats. A woman that I was counseling, she lost her two cats. They were 15 years old, and they ended up passing away within 6 months of each other with lots of medical issues. So she was at the cat vet a lot with them. And so she was saying to me, whoa, I'm never going to be able to have another cat. This was just so painful to lose the two. But within a couple weeks, she was coming to me, and she said, oh, I think I'm going to adopt another cat. And I said, oh, that's great. You miss a cat. She said, well, actually, I miss the cat vet. I miss the clinic. I miss Doc, and Betty at the front desk. She's so nice, because this woman is kind of a recluse, and those were her friends, and she felt their compassion during her time of need. So she said, I think I'm going to adopt 2 more cats. And I said, you are in luck. I have 2 in my back bedroom. And so there they are, and they're very happy with her. So it works. This energy works.
I love that.
Connect with other groups.
Connect with other groups. I mean, what are we doing?
Here we are.
Here we are, this wonderful conference, workshop, event that has been put on here for today, and all the people we're getting to meet. I've met a great lot of new friends, new people, connected with old friends, people that I've met before, and it's been wonderful. It's very energizing.
Yeah.
And to be able to share what we're doing. And on an occasion like this, we're sharing tools. We had 2 great presentations this morning with great tools to take back to what we're doing. Great information, ways in which we can explain the work we do to others. I got a lot out of those 2 presentations this morning, making notes, and I'm going to be sharing that with other people
Yeah,
too.
so it's great you took the time to do that. So
Yeah.
do those kinds of
Do
things.
more of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And can we find the common ground? And this was some of what was talked about earlier too. The shared vision again, we can choose our focus. So people are driving us crazy or another group is driving us crazy. Can we find the common ground and find a way to at least get alongside of them even if we're not working together with them? What's that shared vision? We all come with such ideals which are wonderful, but can we focus on the shared vision? Which means letting go of judgments. So just go ahead.
Tough. No, I just wanted to say tough.
This is tough.
Yeah,
You admit this is an issue for you.
A work in progress.
And so we know how frustrated we are with a lot of people's judgments about pit bulls, right? That drives us crazy. So can we think, okay, maybe we need to seek to understand some of our automatic judgments about some of the people in the public that we're dealing with, and can we listen from a different level? Not agree or condone, but seek to understand a little bit better, which would be helpful for them and for our own sense of self. And wonderful things can happen. Just briefly here, there was a man that came through Adopt Pet Shelter. That's a place in Naperville outside of Chicago that has blessed bonds. He was a little disheveled and a little demanding, and he wanted a tour of the place. And so the executive director was there, and she was in a compassionate, good mood and took him around and that whole kind of thing. And as he left, he wrote out a check for $50,000, and he admitted he was purposely being a little difficult to see how just somebody from the public would be treated. So,
And last week, I got an email from a lady who had attended our workshop, and now she and her husband have a farm sanctuary in Central California, and they're offering a vegan dinner, I think for $40 a head, and you have to book a place at the table because it's at their little farm sanctuary. And this gentleman came in who hadn't booked and also hadn't paid his $40, but they welcomed him. And when he left, same story, different sum of money, he turned around and wrote them a check for $1,500. So those kinds of things, I'm hearing those kinds of stories. Yes. If we take that time to be kind, to embrace other people, to be considerate, good things will happen. And I know in the early days of Best Friends, they didn't always produce the big checks, the $50,000 or whatever, but we always felt that if we were being kind here, it would get repaid in another way. Anybody else had that feeling when you're doing an act of kindness? You're just doing it, but then it gets repaid in some way. Good karma.
great, yes.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember when you're in your groups and your team meetings to share experiences with each other about good things people do, just to get that back in our minds, in our neural pathways. And commit to joy. That's why we got in this in the first place, our passion and our joy. And you're more fun for people and animals. People were talking about that. Joy's irresistible. People want to join you. And that's why when Faith and I wrote our book and contemplated a zillion titles like Save Yourself, Prevent Burnout, we came up with, no, it's about the joy, the power of joy in giving to animals. And then the animals teach us so many things. I actually think this is why I like animal people so much, because they're taught by animals. You guys are around them all day long, and you get the good lessons. So I just want to finish up by sharing with you a really good lesson I got from Felix the cat, one of my great teachers of all time that I keep spreading his message. I met Felix when he was 20 years old. He was being given up to the cat vet / sanctuary. She's actually is my cat vet, but also has an accidental sanctuary. And so the lady who brought in Felix, she was actually the daughter. So her mother, Arlene, had had Felix for 20 years. She had adopted Felix when she was 60 years old, and she was retiring, and Felix was 8 weeks old. And then now she was 80, Felix was 20, but Arlene's daughter said that she just can't keep Felix anymore. She has way too many medical conditions with her COPD and emphysema, and she just keeps having to go in the hospital, and the doctor said it's the allergy to Felix and whatever all that was. So she thought maybe Felix should just be euthanized, because how could a cat adjust to anything at age 20? But Doc said, well, I'll see what we want to do. Well, amazingly, Felix adjusted really fast. Maybe you do this when you're a 20-year-old cat, I don't know. But he went for the self-care. He asked for what he needed. I was actually volunteering in her sanctuary part at the time, and he would come up on our laps, and then he would squeeze our necks with his arms. We called them full body hugs. And he had a lot of issues, so when he would squeeze, he'd also sneeze, all kinds of colors. So, we'd look at each other, oh, you've been hugging Felix, so you could see that. But clearly, he was showing us, find the joy now, and ask him for what he needed and taking care of himself. He also had so many more gifts to share at age 20. Here we thought if we'd have asked Felix, how do you want to spend your golden years? He might have said, yeah, catching some sunbeams and sleeping 90% of the time with my mom. But that wasn't his journey. His journey was he lived at the cat sanctuary, cat vet, and so he met lots of people. He lived with lots of cats, and everybody loved Felix and interacted with Felix. Even some of the other senior cats got adopted because people said, I'd like an old wise cat like Felix. But Felix had so many issues, he wasn't adopted out. He needed the vet to pretty much be there all the time. So he went with the flow. He reframed his story. Mm-hmm. But the biggest lesson of all that I learned from Felix that I like to always pass on to everybody was, it was July 3rd, the morning I was there, and Felix was looking not quite his usual self, so somebody just scooped him up out of the cat tree, brought him to Doc, and so this had happened many times before, and she was able to fluid him and give him some medication, and he'd be good as new before you know it. But this particular morning, he actually, within a couple hours, he passed away right there in Doc's arms. And a lot of volunteers and staff, we were all around him, and we were just shocked and, of course, upset. And we said, I don't understand this. She's always been able to fix him up. How could this possibly be? He's only 23 and a half years old. But it's still hard. Well, later on that evening, we got a glimpse into the mystery of life and the power of the human-animal companion bond. We got a call from Arlene's daughter, who just wanted to let us know that her mother, Felix's mom of 20 years, had also passed away that late afternoon. And it just felt so amazing to us. We thought, well, of course, Felix had to get up there first and greet her, or who knows what went on. But that was just an amazing thing to see. And the biggest lesson I get from that I like to share with you is we need to stop and listen to the life-saving messages that the animals we're saving are giving to us. So the last thing we have to pass out, and then we can answer questions, is just takeaway tools. So the tools are summarized for you so that you have something to go back to that refreshes you. So make sure you get that. I also am happy to share my slides with anybody that wants to email me. I don't know if they're going to be doing that as a conference, or if you need to, you can feel free to email me directly, any of the tests, any of the other sheets, the template. So thank you. You guys were great.